Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. This is part 2 in the PC archeology series on the Compaq Presario 425 all-in-one. In part 1, we took a look on the inside of the machine, powered it up, and took a look on the hard drive to see what kind of programs were on this thing. It was totally, pretty much bone stock the way it was when it came out of the factory, with a few little bits of programs here and there. Don't forget to watch that video first if you haven't already though, because this is a continuation of part 1. In part 2, we're going to dig into this machine and really start to upgrade it, see if I can get this thing running as fast as possible. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Anyhow, okay, time to start the upgrade process. Yes, just turn that off. I love it. All right, first thing to deal with is this hard drive, 214 megabytes if I recall. I found this 512 meg compact flash card in my drawer full of stuff. And I found this right here, which is of course a compact flash to IDE adapter. And it's the type with a slot bracket. So I'm gonna take up one of the two spaces on the back of the chassis here with this adapter, so I can easily change out this card for copying files on and off the computer. I find that easier than even having a network card in here, or say having a SCSI card with an external CD-ROM drive or zip drive. First I have to figure out how to get this hard drive out of here. It seems that this tray, so to speak, that has the floppy drive and the hard drive might come out, maybe? Not quite sure. But actually I can see that there are screws that hold the hard drive on the sides, and I will have to remove the riser card with the slots on it here before I can get to the ones on this side. I'll just pop this out. There it is. One riser card, a little dusty on the back. Actually, no, that's flux residue. And now I can get to this screw right here. It looks like there is just a single one. And remember, as I mentioned before, it's all Torx bits on the old Compaq. And on this side, we have two more. I think this should be freed, and it is. Lift out the old Seagate. With the drive out, I'm trying to see how this tray is held in. I'm actually thinking that it might be like riveted in. These here don't look like screws. Look at this, I hadn't looked on the bottom side, and there is a little map here showing all the settings. Look at that, DX266, what? Speed select, 33 megahertz, 66, or 25 and 50. So of course it's at 25 now. And then we have P2, processor upgrade select, socket not used with pins 1 and 2, PQFP, so that's the quad flat pack. And pins 2 and 3 is PGA, pin grid array, socket used. So I was gonna think I had to mod the motherboard. I was actually ready to do that. Is there actually just a jumper? And indeed, P3 through P5 allows you to select between a DX2 or the regular 487SX, which is like the processor upgrade for this, or an overdrive that would go in that processor normally, or a 486SX in the PGA socket. Pin grid array. Note, the 46SX PQFP is not socketed. The other processors are all PGA processors that plug into the processor upgrade slot. Wow. And we can also disable the modem ROM. There's a modem ROM? A 4.5 volt alkaline computer battery. Oh, Compaq, look at you. Thinking ahead. And it tells you exactly where the jumpers are. Okay, I'm pretty impressed here by this. I really am. Anyhow, when I had this flipped over, I was trying to say that it looks like the tray that holds the floppy drives is kind of riveted in. There were these holes, and they must have punched something through here to round off the metal to kind of hold on. So there and on the bottom side. So I really don't think that this tray actually comes out. Now I would imagine with the floppy drive removed, because you can do that from the sides here, you can take the screws for the motherboard out and actually slide it out of the case this way. or potentially that way. So that would allow you to service this. But it seems like this is built as a solid unit with this not meant to come out. The hard drive is plugged into this external power supply and my USB adapter. So I'm just gonna plug this into my computer here, the lab computer. We're gonna use it for copying this stuff over. Power the hard drive on. So that's weird. It was kind of starting up, spinning down. Let's try spinning it up without this hooked up. So it's fine, and we saw it working in the Compaq. What is going on with my USB adapter? I'm really having bad luck with these things. Checking the jumper map here. So no jumpers installed at all, is standalone with no slave. And sure enough, the jumper's sort of set off at an angle here. So it's the same as having no jumper at all, which is the correct setting. What is happening here? All right, I have another one of those USB type adapters. It's older. The one here that's from Cables to Go actually has serial ATA on it as well on the side here. This older one, boy, I've had forever. I even wrote bad on here. It's not bad. It just is really incompatible with certain drives. But since this drive is so old, I think there won't be an issue here. Turn that on. Here we go. Okay, Windows is not complaining. So Windows is detecting the drive here, but it's saying it's not initialized, which is a lie. And when I unplug it, definitely seems okay. Let's plug that in again to see if that changes. Same problem, not initialized. Okay, time for another tactic. Okay, so I have my Pentium lab machine here with the Seagate hard drive plugged into the primary interface on here, and I have the 512 meg card in here. And I was gonna try to boot this machine off of here, then I could prep this card and copy everything with Xcopy onto it. I think this hard drive is actually dying. This is a Pentium 133, so it's a little bit newer than that Compaq, but it's not massively newer. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. I know, unfortunately, you can't see what I see on the VGA screen here, and I'm only using one camera. It's sort of hanging, detecting this hard drive. It does see it, and it shows it as 204 megabytes, but the computer's not. Okay, now it tried to boot, and it just says missing operating system. We saw on the Compaq, obviously, it was working, but on Windows 10, it said it was not initialized. Now, I didn't write any of the headers or boot record to the disk in Windows 10. It popped up with Disk Manager to do that, and I said don't. And Windows 10, unlike maybe older versions of Windows, it does not damage or screw up hard drives at all if you plug them in. I've done it a million times, and it's completely fine. But this drive is all of a sudden not working, and that's kind of upsetting and annoying because I should probably just pop this back in the Compaq really quick and see if indeed maybe it has gotten corrupted, or maybe that check disk I did right before I powered it off really screwed it up or something. So I have the hard drive from the Compaq on the second IDE interface, and I booted into DOS, and it is showing that there is a partition on here. It does say 99% usage, which is a little concerning. So let's see if I can find the drive. Okay, that's it here. I guess it got very corrupted by running check disk on it. Darn it. All right, not a huge deal. I'm creating a Compaq directory on the Compaq flash card, compact flash card. And I'm gonna Xcopy everything off the D drive onto the Compaq flash card. Here we go. Hopefully this reads everything. And I will probably have to, I don't have a copy of DOS 6.0. No big deal. I will put a copy of DOS 6.2.2 on the new 512 meg card, the one that's gonna go in the Compaq. Then I'll copy everything back onto it, like the Windows directory and all the program directories and stuff like that. And hopefully Windows 3.1 and the other programs on here aren't totally corrupted. All I really care about is the Windows installation plus the other Compaq programs. The other programs that were installed on here I'm gonna remove anyways. So let's see what happens. I think all these files here are what took up all the disk space, but I wonder why it said missing operating system. It's also weird that Windows couldn't even see this drive. So I think that operation was a success. I think everything from the hard drive is on this 512 meg card here. I've gone ahead and removed the short cable, which is right here, put in a long IDE cable. I have removed both of the slot covers here. The riser card's not in, so I'm gonna have to remove that in a moment. But I'm just gonna screw this in because I was under some kind of impression that I could, of course, test this thing out outside of the chassis. But ideally, but there's actually no way to power it up, so that's not gonna happen. And I'm gonna need to figure out how to get the IDE cable over to the slot cover side. I will manage that in a second, because clearly doing it like this isn't gonna work with the riser card there. So I'll probably have to split this cable up so that I can run it through the small gap right here. I went into my bag of tricks and found this extension cable. Well, it's a splitter actually. So I'll run this under here. This is for getting the hard drive power over to where the slots are. And let me just mount this in here. I just want to see if this thing boots. I just need to know that it works. And there we have it. Compaq flash card installed. We slide this chassis, or whatever, the computer, into the main monitor. Really got to give it a bit of a push. Power cable into the downward facing thing. Moment of truth. Of course it powers up. It would be funny and horrible if it stopped working. Looking in the settings here, it says type 65, 523 megabytes. On the other computer, I snapped a picture of what was being auto-detected. 16 heads, 63 sectors, and 1017 cylinders. It's not exactly the same, so let's see if I can type this in. You know what? Does it not let me type it in? I was under the assumption that it would let me type it in, but it's not letting me, so the cylinders is wrong. That could pose a problem. If it tries to fill up the disk, it's not going to be able to write to it. I assume this is actually going to work, so let's just leave this as is. Primary drive, fixed drive, okay. So F3 to exit, and I'm going to say save changes. Let's see if we can even get booted into DOS. If not, I have the floppy disk here, and if I have to recopy all the files, I have to recopy all the files. Not a big deal, because I can just take that card out. Hey, starting MS-DOS, good sign right there. So I did edit the auto exec. This is the one that was on the Compaq originally. I edited it so it doesn't try to run Windows automatically, because that's what it was doing. All right, well, let's just run a quick, let's do a scan disk. I'm not anticipating there will be any errors here. Okay, yep, it looked okay. Don't want to do a surface scan? All right. So really the question is, will Windows run on here? Let's type Win and see what happens. I don't have a mouse connected, so that won't work. But did I ruin and corrupt Windows with that check disk? So far, so good. Tabworks is working. Come on, work, fingers crossed. All right, really good sign. That seems to be working. Okay. So the machine is running off the Compaq flash. Clearly I got to clean up the cabling and stuff. What I wanted to do is I have some utilities copied onto here. I want to run some benchmarks just to see the performance of this thing with this existing CPU, so that when I upgrade the CPU and the RAM, we can see what's actually going on from a performance perspective. All right, first off, we have check CPU. So definitely it's a classic 46. It's an SX, of course, and it's running at 25 megahertz. That is what we knew already. Here's the crappy, but I'm still gonna run it anyways, Landex System Speed Test 6.0. It shows this 46 running at 118 megahertz equivalent. I mean, this number's pretty stupid and fake when you're running on processors like the 46, but I'm gonna do that. FPU is not available, and of course the video speed is slow. Here we are, and check it. 12,054 dry stones and 226.4 wet stones. Here's 3D Bench 2. This is going to be pretty slow on this machine. And the result here is 17.2 frames per second. And this is cache check, which will enumerate exactly what the cache configuration is on this machine. So we know we only have an L1 cache. This motherboard has no L2 cache. So 8 kilobytes, which gives a speed of 25.9 megabytes a second. And the main memory speed is a much slower, well, slower 17.8 megabytes per second. And it does confirm again, 25 megahertz. And with those benchmarks run, I'm gonna turn this off, and it's now time to upgrade the performance on this old beast. All right, for performance, what do I have in mind besides, of course, the speed increase of the hard drive with the compact flash? I have a new CPU and more RAM. For the CPU upgrade, we have none other than this, the Intel 46 DX2 66. This will go from that slow 25 megahertz surface mount chip here to this very speedy 66 megahertz chip with a floating point math coprocessor in here for enhanced math speed, which of course, what that will really increase the speed of, it's not a whole lot. Quake will be too slow to run on here anyway, so that wouldn't be something. So probably really doesn't matter, but I actually have this chip, and if this doesn't work for some reason, I have this chip here, which is an AMD 46 SX266. So just like the 46 DX2, it's clock doubled, it just lacks the math coprocessor. And like I said, for a games machine or just general purpose, it doesn't really matter. First things first, I'm gonna pull this unwieldy IDE cable out of here again. I'm gonna try to make this a little easier to deal with because I'm gonna have to reinstall this riser card in a second. I'll get to which card I'm gonna be installing in here in a second, but I wanted to show everyone a really good trick that I use. When you have these flat ribbon cables that you need to get through small gaps in things like this case. So I'm gonna take my little pick here and I'm gonna poke holes in the IDE cable. Essentially what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to split this into strips. And now the holes are there. I'm just gonna use my fingernails and I'm just going to literally turn this into these strips. Now there's a good reason why you'd wanna do this. A, you could make your cables a little less conspicuous to airflow, but the thing is when the strips are in here, you can actually stack the cable like this, put a zip tie around it, and get a flat ribbon cable through a narrow passageway. Now I'm just actually gonna rip this cable all the way through the length here. And don't worry, with 40-pin cables like this, there aren't any integrity issues for the signal to do something like this. And I'm just gonna grab a zip tie and I'm just going to zip tie this up into sort of little bundles. Now there won't be any issue with the cable fitting through this gap between the riser card and the motherboard right here. All right, with the cable sorted, we gotta figure out how to get this CPU working in this machine. Typically when you have a surface mount 46SX like this, the only thing that would actually work in this upgrade socket, it's an upgrade socket, is a 47DX, is that what the part number's called? Basically, it was a special 46 that Intel released to upgrade these machines. And unlike on, say, a 386, it doesn't just add a math coprocessor to this chip, which is what's happening on like a 286 or a 386. The upgrade chip that goes in this socket is a full-fledged 46, just like this one, but it has a slight difference where there's an extra pin on here, which disables this processor completely by grounding one pin that's not normally used on a chip like this, and that allows you to do it. And they did that so you couldn't just take a standard 46 and pop it in here. You had to use one of these upgrade processors or like a Pentium overdrive processor. I think that did it as well. But it seems that Compaq has gone ahead and added jumpers to this motherboard that probably grounds the pin on here that disables this chip and allows you to use a standard 46 in this socket. There's really no difference other than that special pin for grounding. Now, what I was gonna do is take this motherboard out and actually run a bodge wire from that pin to ground on the socket on the underside of the motherboard. That would just permanently disable this chip and allow me to use a standard processor in here. But the fact is, seems that Compaq has done that for us. So first things first, I need to set this thing to 33 megahertz because that is what this chip uses. It's clock doubled, and that is this jumper right here. So I just set that right there. Next up, we're gonna set P2 jumper to use the PGA. And the handy diagram, P2 is right here. It's gonna be hard to see. Let me zoom in. This is the P2 jumper right there. It's sort of hidden underneath the drive a little bit. Sorry, I'm blocking the view with my fingers. But I set that to the other position, and theoretically that actually should already have disabled this processor. I think if I tried to turn this on now with that jumper set, this thing wouldn't do anything. And then next up, there's a processor selection jumper, but a 46DX2, which is what I'm putting in here, and the 46SX quad flat pack, which is the original onboard processor, all has the same exact configuration. So either way, I don't have to change anything there. And it looks like I can disable the modem, and I might as well just do that because I'm never going to use the internal modem. So the external modem ROM is pin 23. So P7 is right here, and that's the one I'm going to change. So P7 is right here, modem ROM, MROM, it says not populated. So I guess there's nothing I can do about that one. So let's install this DX266. So it has a notch with a dot, and that goes on right here on the motherboard where there's also a notch. There is an extra pin on here that is not on the processor. I think that's on the upgrade processor, but I checked the pin out. It's not used when you use a standard 486 like this, or even the upgrade processor. It is not used. That is just simply a key. So I just push this in. Let's give it a good push so it's in there. And there we go, that is in there. Now I think I will stick a heatsink on here with some double-sided thermal adhesive, but for testing, before I do that, we'll just make sure this works. And I need to install some RAM in here. I don't know what the maximum allowable memory is in here. It says memory upgrade sockets, there's 2, and that is it. I have 2 8 megabyte EDO memory modules here, extended data out. Not sure if this thing can use EDO. I'm pretty sure if you put EDO memory into a computer that can't use it, it still works. It just, you don't get the extra speed benefit there. Ugh, these are plastic sockets. That's sucky. So let's get this in here without breaking it. There we go, click, click. Click, click. All right, both of those are in there. Will this work? I actually routed the cable correctly, so I'm just going to reinstall this riser card in here. And voila, it actually works just fine. The cable is nicely sitting underneath there. Moment of truth. Let's see together if this computer works or there's a problem. And we have a black screen, I would say. That would be a non-working computer. I know for sure that this processor absolutely works. I tested it in another computer before I put it into this thing, so it's good. I think I need to remove that RAM. That could quite well be a problem that this thing doesn't support that EDO RAM. I shouldn't have put that in. I should have done one upgrade at a time. Here we are, try number 2, took the RAM out. Let's see what happens now. Oh, hey, okay, it was the RAM. Rude. A code processor has been detected and is not reported in the CMOS. Run setup. Oh, Compaq, you do everything by the book, don't you? F10 for setup. Numeric coprocessor has been installed. All right, let's just run that and hit save. Save changes. So I ran cache check here to check things out right off the bat. 46DX2 clocked at 66.8 megahertz. We still have the same level 1 cache at 8 kilobytes only. I think there are some AMD processors that would have more, 16K. I don't have any of those, so that would give this thing a little bit of a speed bump. But we still have no level 2 cache, which is what it is. That's of course a problem because the motherboard doesn't have it on there. So we're getting 67.7 megabytes per second. Looking back at my little cheat sheet here, we were getting 23.9. So that pretty much coincides with the clock speed, I guess. So 23.9, 24, 25 megahertz, and 33.8 for the main memory speed versus 17.8. So a nice measurable speed increase there. I really want to upgrade the RAM from 4 megabytes. That's just not quite enough. So I'm going to look for some more RAM that maybe will work in here. And I'm going to try some different stuff until I find something. I don't bore you with all the details. All right, there we go. I have 2 4 meg sticks in here that are working, so we have a total of 12 megabytes, which to be honest, for 46 like this, totally fine. And going through my bag of RAM, the back sim is actually Compaq branded. That's the first one I tried and it worked. And then the next one here is IBM branded and it worked. does say 8 megabytes on there. I must have written that incorrectly because it's actually 4. Or it might be 8 and this thing doesn't support half of it. I don't know. Either way, 4 plus 4 plus 4 on the motherboard, we got 12 total. Next step in Operation Pimp My All-in-One, I'm going to install a heatsink on top of this 486 DX266. I don't even know if this thing needs a heatsink. I don't think it technically does, but why not? And I think there's enough airflow inside this computer case due to the way the computer is designed to suck air in on the sides and out the top of the monitor, that if I put this heatsink like so, that should work quite well for actually keeping that processor nice and cool. Not to mention it doesn't actually interfere with anything around the processor because this thing is actually just slightly smaller than the processor. So a little 99% isopropyl alcohol. I'm just gonna clean the top of the CPU to get rid of any potential oily fingerprints that might be on there from when I was pushing it in. Look at that, actually a little bit of color was coming off there. Let's keep rubbing that. Oh, it's kind of bluish. Anyhow, do the same on this heatsink, which I had in my bag of tricks, as I like to call it. And then I have a roll of this double-sided thermal adhesive. It's pretty strong. I haven't had any problems with this, things falling off. I stick these little heat sinks that are just resting on here. I stick these on all sorts of chips inside Commodore 64s, and I've never had one actually fall off. Not to say it can't. And this is a larger heatsink. It's made out of aluminum, as they say in the US, but aluminium everywhere else. It's pretty light. Also, this computer, because it has a big monitor attached to it, is probably going to sit with the motherboard facing down forever, at least while I have it. So I'm not too worried about this falling off because gravity will kind of help it stay on. It goes without saying that this thermal tape or adhesive or whatever this is not very good for conducting the heat into the processor. I mean, it's certainly better than nothing. It's not as good as, of course, a good thermal paste, but then you need a clamping mechanism to hold it on the processor. And there are epoxies and things you could use that are also really good, but this is something that you can actually peel off the processor in the future. Oh, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna write 33 megahertz on, or 66 megahertz on the side of this, because obviously once I stick this on, it will cover up the speed. There we are, DX266. And now it's just a matter of pushing it onto the processor. And there we go. And it's on there pretty firmly. I mean, I can lift up the entire computer. This whole thing is relatively heavy from the processor there. So I really don't think that's going anywhere. And that should help very nicely in keeping that thing nice and cool. The final upgrade that this computer is going to get is this. It's a Creative Lab Sound Blaster 16 CT1750. Now this is a version, of course, that has all these connectors for the various CD-ROM drives, which I won't be using any of, but this is still a good card. It's period correct for this. Came out around 1994, looking at the chips on here, which is slightly newer than this, but it's a very compatible and a very capable sound card and will be perfect in this thing. I think it will be better if I move the compact flash down to the lower slot and then I put this on the top. Now I do have to screw this riser back in because I had taken it out and taken these screws off. So I'll just pop these back in. So I'll just get this in here. Luckily it's a relatively large card, but it does fit. And in the top slot, if I can get this in here, there we go. In the top slot, it absolutely clears the heatsink for the CPU. I don't think it would in the lower slot, but in the top slot, no problem. All right, I think I'm ready to go. This thing's pretty pimped right now. Let's get this back inside the monitor, see how this all works. I've left MemTest 86 version 2 running on the old Compaq Presario. No RAM errors with the 12 megabytes. That's a thumbs up. Well, the Compaq is working amazingly well. I've put it through its paces. I have the lights off so the screen looks a little bit better. We are running a demo here by Future Crew Second Reality, and it works amazingly well. Let me turn up the music here. These LabTech speakers, while they work, they certainly don't sound very good. I think I found these at a thrift store years ago, and they are period correct for a computer like this, but not so good. Anyhow, I am really pleased with how this machine came out. That RAM and processor upgrade helped it dramatically. And of course, that CF card made this thing a lot quieter because now there's just the quiet hum of the fan that's inside the top of the monitor. And of course, it's going to be a lot more reliable than this old spinning hard drive here. I wrote down the benchmark results before the CPU upgrade. Let's just check out what we're getting now after the upgrade. All right, landmark speed 600. We were getting 118 megahertz on the CPU speed, and for FPU speed, of course, it was NA before because there was no floating point unit. So that, of course, is an upgrade. And characters per second was 4,012 before and is now 4,593. Let's see what check it gives us. Maximum performance level reached. It is showing 66 megahertz here now. For dry stones, we are now getting 33,609, and before we were getting 12,054. Sizable increase there. And then for wet stones, we were getting 226,000, and now we're getting 10,659. So a really sizable increase. And let's check out 3D Bench 2. This should be a little bit faster, although it's probably going to be held back because of the slow video card that's on this motherboard. And of course, the lack of level 2 cache. That really hurts. And we're getting 32 frames per second when before I was getting 17.2. And I showed this before, its cache check takes longer to run now because of the extra RAM this computer has. So the level 1 cache is 8K, as we said before. It's getting 67.8 megabytes per second out of that cache. Before it was 23.9. Like I said before, it matches the clock speed. Main memory speed is 33.8 megabytes per second now, and before it was 17.8. We have a copy of Doom on here, and this works pretty well. Definitely performance is suffering on this machine because of the fact, I'm gonna turn the sound down. Because of the L2 cache, I think it's really suffering. Although if I set the graphics detail to low, which sort of doubles every pixel, it's pretty fast. I think Doom's frame per second is capped at 35, and it seems to be getting that. But when I set it to high detail, it's probably about 15 frames per second. Very playable though. If I had this as a kid, I'd be extremely happy. It's completely usable. And I know I didn't test this out on the 46SX25 before I upgraded it, but this would have been really slow, really hard to play. Not to mention, without a sound card, you're not going to get a whole lot out of it. What's interesting is I was just trying to show off some stuff playing ad-lib music. It doesn't seem to be working anymore. This is the Creative Labs Diagnose program, and playing synthesized music just results in nothing. It absolutely was working in this program before.
16-bit testing.
The other sounds are working, so it's not like the speakers aren't connected.
16-bit testing.
The other sounds work fine in here, so it's not a problem with the settings in the card or anything like that. But if I pick synthesized, I hear a hiss, and I can push up and down to control the volume. There's hissing coming out, but no sound anymore. And it absolutely was working perfectly, the ad-lib sound. So I'm not sure what's going on. If I check mixer set, MIDI, which I think should be the synthesizer, that has the volume turned up. So I really don't see any other issue with this program. I might have to just, you know what, why don't I just power cycle the whole computer? I've rebooted it and that doesn't help. Maybe a power cycle is what's needed. Let's try that. While this reboots, I was just in Doom a second ago and it was playing music there. So I don't really get what's going on here. Let's try the ad-lib jukebox, which was working. I had this installed on here and I was playing music on this and it worked fine. Oh. Okay. So that is working now. So clearly I just had to power cycle the computer and then it was fine. And in fact, I'm sure the Diagnose works. Anyhow, if anyone remembers the good old ad-lib jukebox program, here it is. CGA graphics for the win. The Star Trek game that we played earlier that was already on this computer should have sound. There it is. I just rebooted out of that. Hopefully it doesn't result in a copyright strike. I tried to play through that game a little bit. It's pretty difficult. It actually supports the mouse, but the UI controls are very unhelpful. It must have had a little cheat sheet that came with the original game to tell you which keys to push to do different functions within the game. In the 80s, PCs weren't known for having really good game graphics, as in bad scrolling, things like that. Sure, there were plenty of games, but they just didn't have the fast, smooth animation that consoles had, or say, computers like the Amiga. But here's an example of a game, Turrican II, ported to the PC in 1995, 2 years after this machine, which has great sound. If I turn this up. Okay, that's a fail. I wanted to play the music, but it sounds like one of the ad-lib notes is being held continually from when I rebooted out of Star Trek. Here, listen. Let me reboot the computer again. I'm just gonna power cycle it so I can clear that bad note off. There's probably a little DOS program that someone wrote that can stop all the notes on the FM synthesis chip, the Yamaha chip on the Sound Blaster on reboot. If there is such a thing, please let me know. I'd put that in my auto exec bat, so on a Control-Alt-Delete out of game, it stops the notes. All right, let's try Turrican again. Now the music sounds right. It uses the same exact music that the Amiga had, and it sounds amazing. It's a great tune, and this port is incredible. 256 color graphics, VGA, 60 frames per second, silky smooth animation. And when you have a gamepad like this, a Gravis gamepad, 4-button support for the game, so you're not overloaded with one button like you were on the Amiga. And it makes playing a lot easier. So here we can check out the incredible silky smooth animation. I'm pretty sucky at this game. I used to be quite good at it on the Amiga. I just killed myself. Anyhow, as you can see, super smooth animation, good, great sound and graphics. And of course you have a button for jump, you have a button for fire, you have a button for like the special function, like that can turn you into this little thing, or does a smart bomb. So 3 of the buttons actually do something, which is super great over the Amiga, which, as I said before, only has 1 button. And last but not least, we have Microsoft Windows, which is the original install from Compaq, still working great. There's that old Windows 3.1 start sound. Yes, the sound is working. Tabworks is still working great. Of course, I've cleaned it up because I deleted all the programs that had personal information, and anything else with personal information all gone from this machine. I fixed the fonts so they look a little nicer. And from a speed perspective, Windows is working a whole lot better than it was before. It's still not super fast due to the fact that the video card on here is a little slow, but it does work. And yes, I can use the media player to load canyon.mid, and here we go. That's working. And we got multitasking ability. So I'll turn the volume down a little bit so we hear the off-tune music of this. One thing I wanted to show is if I run Windows Setup, this shows that this is running with the Cirrus Logic 5420 800x600 at 256 color driver. So that is absolutely working. It does say compact mouse, which is kind of funny. I switched over to using Cute Mouse, but that does show that the driver is functional. Now it does seem a little slow. Look how slow it draws the whole screen. So that's weird, but the scrolling doesn't seem slow. So I'm thinking that the acceleration is sort of working, the 2D acceleration. I guess the 5420 is just not that accelerated versus later cards. This chip is known that it has a blitter in it to help with moving of graphics around the video memory, kind of like the Amiga has. It's just 2D acceleration, but it does help a lot. And I don't know for sure if it is working, but I guess the scrolling could be worse. But certainly look at the slowness of drawing the window. That's not ideal. There's one more thing I want to talk about with this computer, and I think people may have noticed it. It looks like the screen has a little bit of a smudge going on right here, like it's dirty. Unfortunately, this is actually a scratch in the glass. I've done my best to clean that, but there's a scratch that sort of starts up here and goes all the way down to there. Hopefully that's coming across in the camera, but I can feel it with my fingernails, and it's actually in the glass itself. I don't really know how to try to address this, but where plastic, there would be ways, but unfortunately with glass, I don't know what to do with this. So if anyone has any tips on how to maybe polish this out, something I could do by hand, please let me know. I'd be very interested, because it is the only blemish on this machine for the most part. Otherwise, it's in incredibly perfect condition. So the Compaq Presario 425, released in 1993, well, at least this one was made in 1993, quite a capable machine with a little bit of an upgrade, the RAM, the storage, and of course that processor, which more than doubled the speed of this thing. If you haven't been able to tell by my enthusiasm, I'm really impressed by this machine. It's so easy to work on. It's so upgradable. The fact that Compaq allowed you to put in a regular CPU into the upgrade socket, which I think was not something that Intel wanted, they kind of went against the grain there. Just really great. The only thing this thing is let down by is the lack of level 2 cache that really doesn't allow the 486 DX2 to stretch its legs. If you have thoughts about this video, I'd love to hear about them in the comment section below. If you liked it, a thumbs up would be excellent. If you didn't, you know all that stuff to do. And of course, subscribe. And then thanks to all my patrons. I really appreciate the outpouring of support I've got since starting Patreon. Thank you very much. In addition, I am starting a second channel, which is called Adrian's Digital Basement 2, but instead of the number 2, it's 2 as in Apple 2 with the square brackets. I'll put a link in the description below to that. I don't know how I'm going to be using that channel quite yet, but candy reviews will be on there, and maybe little follow-up videos to stuff like these. If people ask specific questions, if a lot of people ask questions, maybe I'll stick follow-up videos on there. I'm not sure, but get subscribed to that channel so you won't miss any content that I post there. And that is going to be it. Thank you very much for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.